Hello, everyone. Welcome to our series on how to have difficult conversations. Really important topic. And this teaching is going to be on what's called too angry to speak. Too angry to speak. So we've all been there, right? But first, before we get to the teaching, my name is Shelly. For any of you I haven't met yet, Gin Trogdon is actually out of town for a couple of weeks, so I'm going to teach this teaching. And then next week, Marlene, who comes to us from DC, is going to teach how and when to say no and no more. So really important topic as well, obviously. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, we're going to do a breathing meditation that helps our mind to settle, because we go from being very, very busy to sitting down and wanting to listen or wanting to meditate, and it's impossible. It's impossible to start with a very busy mind and then go to peace. So, assuming your mind gets busy like mine. So the first thing, look around. I know live streaming can be challenging because you're in an environment where you're used to being busy, doing lots of things. So just look around and see if there's anything you can do to help give yourself this space for a little while to be able to listen and concentrate and meditate. If you're not listening to me on your phone, put your phone somewhere else so it's not even enticing to look at it. Okay. First thing you want to do is get in your best meditation position. So if you're in a chair and your feet hit the ground nicely, you can sit like this. If your feet don't hit the ground, the most important part about your position is you want your back nice and straight, neck nice and straight, head barely tilted down so that it's going down your nose to about 2 feet in front of you. Everything about the position is key to having a good meditation. The hand mudra in this tradition is left hand down, right hand on top, palms up, thumbs form an arch. This represents the union of wisdom and compassion, telling us if our meditation, if our actions, if everything is the union of wisdom and compassion, everything else will just come. So you drop that in your lap, arms nice and loose, especially this time of year because it makes you hot if they're too tight and makes you too tense. So straight back, straight neck, gaze down, eyes either closed or letting just a tiny bit of light in, whichever is the least distracting for you. Take a few breaths just to notice your posture so that you won't need to give it any attention during your meditation. Just shake out any tension and then be satisfied. I'm as comfortable as I'm going to get. It's fine. And then take a minute to get your attention down to the level of your heart. It's very important that our attention is down where our subtle mind resides, which Buddha says is in the middle of your heart chakra. We want to get out of our head and into our heart, no matter what the meditation is. And then all we're going to do for this meditation is focus on the sensation of our breath to the exclusion of all other thoughts and feelings. So thoughts and feelings will arise. We're just not going to pay them any attention. And you don't want to push them away because that's giving them attention. When you notice them, you just go back to focusing on the sensation of your breath and abide in that. So do this for a while, just your breath. We want to be determined not to follow distractions, but also gentle. So we never beat ourselves up. Sometimes when we first learn to meditate, we find our mind is really busy and it's hard to hold our object. But I promise with practice, it gets better and better. So just keep coming back to your breath again and again. And every once in a while, with part of your mind, just do a quick check. If you're thinking of anything other than your breath, just let it go. Focus on your breath. Buddha taught that when the turbulence of disturbing thoughts subsides and your mind becomes still, there's a natural peace, joy that reveals itself in our mind. It's there all the time for us to tap into. We just have to get all the busyness out of the way. So when that arises for you, turn your focus to abiding in this peaceful feeling, this stillness in your mind, understanding that even the tiniest bit of peace is an indicator of our limitless potential for boundless peace. And if you'd like, you can imagine tapping in to the peace of mind that is your spiritual guides or enlightened beings, Buddhas, holy beings, whatever touches your heart the most. We want to become familiar with this feeling so that when our mind starts to stray from it, we can notice that very quickly and bring ourselves back again and again throughout our day so that our life doesn't become separate from our spiritual practice. They're all one. We learn to get peaceful in meditation and then more and more stay peaceful during our day. And then from this place of peace, we always want to start our practice with an intention. So through these prayers and meditations and teachings, may I learn how to develop and maintain peace of mind, how to combat my anger, how to speak with wisdom and compassion and love, how to train my mind so that I can benefit others. And then gently arise from your meditation. Okay, so I'm going to be teaching from a couple of Geshe-la's books. The first one is called How to Solve Our Human Problems. Really important one about patience. So it's all about anger and patience. So opposing minds. The opponent to anger is patience, love, compassion. And then I'm also going to teach out of how to understand the mind which is Geshe-la's book where he talks about all the intricacies of our mind. So the difference between anger and spite and resentment and frustration and impatience, many levels of anger and other delusions. So too angry to speak. We can all relate to that, to having been too angry to speak at some point. And there's great wisdom in that phrase, too angry to speak. Because what it's telling us is when we're angry, we shouldn't speak. So why? Why? You have to look at your experience. So what has happened in your life when you've allowed yourself to speak out of anger? So generally, what do? We hurt people's feelings. We give little digs, sarcasm, teasing. Very often those are ways to cloak our anger. Oh, I was just kidding. Oh, I was just being sarcastic. But what we're really doing is trying to do what our anger is telling us to do. So what our anger is telling us to do is to harm the other person, to retaliate, to teach them a lesson. And what we'll learn as I go over what delusions are, what specifically the delusion of anger is, that's exactly what our delusions are trying to get us to do. So we started this practice with an intention. So our intention is never going to be in the morning when we should set our intention. It's never going to be, oh, I hope to get really, really angry with my friend today and yell at him. We're not going to set that intention from our wisdom, are we? And yet the minute a delusion enters our mind, it convinces us to act in a way that's different from our kind and loving, compassionate, joyful intentions. So delusion. Okay, so in How to Understand the Mind, Geshe-la defines delusion. So he says our delusions, it's a mental factor, which just means mind. It's a particular mind that arises from inappropriate attention and that functions to make the mind unpeaceful and uncontrolled. So literally your delusions function, Geshe-la says in one of his other books, is to rob you of your inner peace. So there's a part of our mind, not intrinsic to our mind, but present in it, can be eradicated because it's not a part of it's not our actual mind, that is trying to rob you of your inner peace. So let's look at anger specifically. So in How to Solve Our Human Problems, in the chapter called The Faults of Anger, which we need to read again and again and again and again, and I'll explain more in a few minutes why. So Geshe-la says, anger is one of the most common and destructive delusions, and it afflicts our mind almost every day. To solve the problem of anger, we first need to recognize the anger within our mind, acknowledge how it harms both ourselves and others, and appreciate the benefits of being patient in the face of difficulties. We then need to apply practical methods in our life every day to reduce our anger and finally to prevent it from arising at all. So I'm going to talk a lot about what to do when anger has arisen, because for most of us, that's the place we're in frequently. Eventually, when we can eradicate anger and replace it with compassion and love and cherishing others, we won't have to work so hard at dispelling our anger. We just won't ever go there. Okay, so Geshe-la says, what is anger? He says, anger is a deluded mind that focuses on an animate or inanimate object, feels it to be unattractive, exaggerates its bad qualities, and wishes it harm. For example, when we are angry with our partner, at that moment, he or she appears to us as unattractive or unpleasant. We then exaggerate their bad qualities by focusing only on those aspects that irritate us, ignoring all their good qualities and kindness, until we have built up a mental image of an intrinsically faulty person. We then wish to harm them in some way, probably by criticizing or disparaging them. Because it is based on an exaggeration, anger is an unrealistic mind. That intrinsically faulty person or thing that it focuses on does not, in fact, exist. So we know this from our experience. You love a person, your friend, your partner, your boss, whoever it is. You normally get along with them just fine. In fact, 10 minutes ago, you got along with them. You even maybe loved them. Something happens, anger enters our mind. And within a very short period of time, that person is distorted to us. We're focusing on their bad qualities as if they are their bad qualities. And not only as if they are their bad qualities, but as if they are only those bad qualities. We immediately forget everything they've ever done for us that was kind. So delusions are distorted, they're deceptive. They are literally a part of our mind that is lying to us in order to get us to follow them. And it's exaggerated. So it's deceptive in that it's an exaggerated view of something. So if you think of the last time you were super, maybe very angry, don't go to the super angry because you may not be able to pass that one just yet. But think of something that you were really angry at in the last couple of weeks that you're not angry about now. So why is that possible? Why is it possible that a couple of weeks ago in the moment, you were very, very angry, but you no longer are? It's because you were afflicted by delusion. You were its puppet in that moment. It exaggerated reality, it distorted reality. Remember, its function is to rob you of your inner peace. It completely robbed you of your inner peace, and you bought into it. So the minute we learn even to say, oh, this is a delusion in my mind, it will cut its effectiveness by 50%. It really will. So our delusions don't want us to shine a light on them. It takes away their power. Their power is the fact that you don't realize it's happening. You don't realize that it's exaggerated. If you were angry and I came up to you and said, no, that's exaggerated, you would argue with me. Immediately, you would say it's not exaggerated. This is exactly how this person is. Because we're literally, you've heard the phrase blinded with anger. We're blind. We're not seeing things correctly, but we are relating as if it was reality. Okay, so part of the definition talked about inappropriate attention. So remember, the definition of a delusion It's a mind that arises from inappropriate attention. So what that means is we dwell on it. So if your anger only arose for a second, and you could use your wisdom and go, nope, I'm not even going there. I'm not even going there. I know I'm angry at what that person just did, but they've done 1,000 nice things for me. I'm going to focus on that instead. Your anger would be very little problem, right? It would be very little problem. It arose for a second, you used your wisdom to bypass it, and you're not following it. But what generally happens is what's called inappropriate attention, and it's the actual problem with our delusions. So Geshe-la says, even if our mind meets an object of delusion, a delusion will arise in our mind only if we allow inappropriate attention to develop. Generally, inappropriate attention is a mind that dwells on a contaminated object and exaggerates its apparent qualities. So in the moment that we're angry, okay, so your partner left their shirt on the floor for the 100th time. You have asked them not to do that 100 times. You're angry. The exaggeration is on many levels. This is an intrinsically horrible person, full of the fault of dropping their shirt on the floor. They have no good qualities at all. We're completely blinded to that in this moment. We also exaggerate the crime that they've committed. We exaggerate shirt on the floor as this huge, huge thing. Terrible, awful thing that this person has done, that this horrible person has done. We also simultaneously exaggerate our inability to deal with this thing, our harm. They have harmed me hugely by dropping their shirt on the floor. So there's 3 parts that we're exaggerating all at once. We then, generally, without Buddha's teachings, focus and ruminate on why we need to be angry. Why? Because especially if we've been doing this for a while, we have some wisdom, right? So we're trying, we almost argue in our mind. Nope, I'm not going to follow my anger. Buddha tells me not to follow my anger, because when I follow my anger, my mental peace is gone. I tend to harm, retaliate, make that person feel bad about what they did. Many reasons. So you read the faults of anger again and again and again. But simultaneously, that delusion is trying to rob you of your inner peace. So it starts giving you reasons. You're justified in your anger. So you'll even hear people say this, I deserve to be angry. You deserve to be angry. So you deserve to be miserable is what you deserve. That's what you're really saying. Because part of anger is, yes, if we're really far in our anger, we're managing to make them as miserable as we are. But very often things can make us angry and they've moved on, but we're still stuck in the anger, arguing with why we need to go tell them. Okay, so too angry to speak. Our anger tells us you need to go tell them. You need to go teach them why it's not okay to do what they did. And you need to do it now. You need to do it right now because they're going to think you're weak if you don't go stand up for yourself. I'm just standing up for myself. So watch what your anger is telling you. It's how it gets us to follow it again and again and again, despite our intention, despite our wisdom. Yeah, so remember, it's a distorted state of mind, which means if we speak in that moment, our speech is going to reflect that exaggeration. Not our intention, not our wisdom. It's not going to reflect our kindness, our love for that person. So Geshe-la says in that same section on the faults of anger, page 24 in this edition, he says, one of the most harmful effects of anger is that it robs us of our reason and good sense. Wishing to retaliate against those whom we think have harmed us, we expose ourselves to great personal danger, merely to exact petty revenge, to get even for perceived injustices or slights, or even real ones. We are prepared to jeopardize our job, our relationships, and even the well-being of our family and children. When we are angry, we lose all freedom of choice, driven here and there by the uncontrollable rage. Sometimes this blind rage is even directed at our loved ones and benefactors. Yeah, I remember a story my teacher told me that he had heard in the news of a man who was with his wife and his baby daughter. And he was fighting with the wife. And very impulsively, he grabbed his baby daughter and threw her in the water. There's no part of that man that wanted to kill his baby daughter. We literally are sometimes out of control with anger. And it causes us to do things that we would never in our right mind do. And part of the reason I tell that is because we also have to know how to deal with people who are coming at us with delusion. Okay, so that later. So first, how do we handle it when we're in the midst of delusion? So I looked a lot at what it's really important that you get to know your mind. It's what Buddha teaches us. It's that everything is about getting to know our mind and what's happening in our mind. Because if we understand the mechanism of how this works, we can start to take it apart. We can start to win over it. So the next time you're angry, list all the things that your anger is telling you. And ask, where is the lie? What is it promising me? It's promising me all kinds of things. So you look at the demonstrations, for instance. The demonstrations that were done with strength, controlled minds, strong minds, quietly presented, had so much impact. But the ones that turn to anger and violence, what happens? What happens on the news when it's turned into looting and stores being broken into and things being set on fire? What happens to the message? The message gets lost completely because people can ignore us when we're angry. They can blow us off. They can, oh, she's just crazy. It's okay. She's just having one of her tantrums, or she's just angry. What she has to say may have a valid point, but you're not going to hear it. You're going to be able to blow it off. We also get very defensive when people come at us with anger. So even in trying to get their message across, the people who have the opposite belief are going to be able to defend themselves because they've gotten the attention onto the violence, onto the anger, and off of the message. I hope that makes sense. So what we tend to think when we're in our anger is they'll hear us if we speak out of anger. So I've heard this before. One of our practitioners, Askin Lakenrab, What about the civil rights movement? And he said, that came out of a lot of anger. And Genla Kenrab very skillfully said, he said, I don't think its success came out of anger and violence. I think it came out of love and compassion and knowing that something was wrong. So when we say too angry to speak, it doesn't mean we're not going to speak. It's important to have a voice. One of the things that I found is it's generally when I'm not using my voice that I get the most angry because the anger festers. So you do have to use your voice. It's when and how that matter. So I've heard this as a litmus test. You ask yourself, does this really need to be said? So let's say I'm angry with somebody and they've left their shirt for the 50th time on the floor and I need to say something. I need to say that I'm very frustrated by this. I'm feeling uncherished, unappreciated by that repeated action. Okay, does this really need to be said? Is it a big deal or is it something I need to just let go of? Am I the person to say this? If you're angry, if you don't like the person, you are not the person to say this. Okay, we do this all the time. I see practitioners do it all the time, but this person needs to know. They need to know what they're doing is not cherishing others. They need to know what they're doing is inconsiderate. If you don't like the person, you're not the person to teach them that. Somebody who likes them will teach them that eventually. Does it need to be said? Am I the person to say it? Is this the time to say it? If I'm angry, no, it is not the time to say it. If they are angry, it is also not the time to say it. So we have to have a lot of patience and a lot of wisdom when it comes to speaking. So one of the things that I have noticed when I actually need to tell somebody something that they're not going to want to hear, most likely, like that they're doing something that maybe upsets me, if I find it really easy to go talk to them, I'm probably angry. Our delusions make it really easy to act impulsively. If I find I need to talk to somebody I'm angry at, who's a friend and I care about and I don't want to hurt, it's a little more difficult. So my general rule is if I'm angry, I don't speak for 2 to 3 days about this thing. Number one, because 80% of what we get angry at, we're not angry about it anymore 2 to 3 days later. So what does that tell us? What does that tell us? Our mind way more than it is about that person or what that person did. It's what kind of mood we are in. It's what kind of day we're having. It's whether we've meditated today or not. Makes a huge difference. Huge difference. Most of the teachers in this tradition, if you go to them with a complaint, they'll just say, did you meditate today? Because they know it helps. They know it helps a lot. There's a place you get in meditation. It has to do with our energy winds. It's part of what Tantra is about. You get your meditation into a very different place. So I've actually had a problem where I was angry with someone, and I've gone into meditation to fix the problem. And when I get into that place, I don't have a problem. I literally don't have a problem. All that comes up is how much I love that person every single time. That tells you it's my mind. It's where my mind is at. So we have to get so much better at trying to fix the problems within our own mind, not to the exclusion of fixing the external. Sometimes the externals have to be fixed. So again, Marlene is going to teach next week on when and how to say no more. There is a time that often you say no more. So an example. So one of my friends came to me extremely angry. End of a rope, going to have to kick her wife out of the house. She needed to kick her wife out of the house. She was using drugs around the children. absolutely had to kick her out. That part didn't change. Needed to have a discussion. That part didn't change. Needed to have it today, even though she was angry. Needed to have it today. So we can't always wait the 2 to 3 days. Sometimes things need to be taken care of that aren't okay. But when she came to me, she was so furious that she had no love left. And I could tell where the conversation was going to go. It was going to be judgment and blame and anger and hurting her, trying to hurt her because she was so angry. So I just asked her to spend a few minutes with me, and I got her to talk about her wife and how much she loved her, how much when she first met her, she loved her, and why they had had children together, and get in touch with that part of her heart, and then go have a very difficult conversation where she kicked her out of the house. So none of that changed, but the conversation was completely different, coming from a place of love and wisdom and kindness. So I've had people tell me when I've taught, Buddha said, anger solves nothing. And I've had people come back to me and say, yeah, it has. Yeah, it has. And it took me a long time. I really contemplated it for a very long time to figure out why it is that they think anger is helpful. And I realized some people, it's very hard for them to have a voice until they're angry. The problem is we're not as skillful, we're not as kind, we're not as loving when we're angry. So we have to learn how to have a voice. We have to learn how to know when things are not okay and to verbalize that. Otherwise, what happens is you're suppressing your anger. You're not actually, what does he say? So Geshe-la says controlling anger and repressing anger are two very different things. If we bottle our anger up and it festers, it's going to come out anyway. I promise you. You can think I'm not going to talk to this person about my anger, but that's where the teasing comes in and the sarcasm comes in and the little digs come in. I'm not going to face the fact that I'm angry. I'm going to pretend like I'm not angry, but I'm still going to try to hurt them because by definition, part of what happens with our delusions is we try to harm other people. We try to make them feel bad. So a good mother is going to tell their children what they need to hear, even when they don't want to hear it, but in a kind and loving way. So Genla Dekyang, the head of this tradition, our general spiritual director, used to tell me what I needed to hear. She would tell me, this is your delusion, it's controlling you, you need to identify it and reduce it. Not those words, but essentially what she was telling me. But she said it with zero judgment and complete love. I knew that she had nothing invested in it. It wasn't about her. It wasn't about her at all. It was her trying to help me. So she said it strongly. She would say it pretty strongly, but I could hear her. I didn't get defensive because there was no judgment in what she was saying, and she was saying it out of love for me. It's the way Geshe-la is straight with us in his teachings. Buddha is straight with us, and it's out of kindness that they're doing that. They're telling us how it is. We have to be able to look at and see the dirt in our mind, or we can't get rid of the dirt in our mind. If I don't see that I have an angry mind, that I get irritable, that I'm easily frustrated, how am I going to work on changing that? So we have to be very humble in this practice, very humble. Pride is like, Geshe-la said, it's like being puffed up, like a balloon. And if you drop water on a balloon, it just falls right off. We can't learn, we can't grow, we can't improve if we're proud. It just won't stick. So Atisha was one of the lineage holders in this tradition. And one of the things that he said was, when we're alone, we should be very aware of what's going on in our mind. When we're with others, we should watch our speech. Really carefully watch our speech. So if you read in Joyful Path of Good Fortune, it talks about the 10 non-virtuous actions. Very important, because if we don't know what actions create negative karma for us, we won't know what's creating our suffering. So Buddha teaches that our suffering comes from our actions. Our joys come from our actions. Our experiences, 100% come from our actions. Nobody can create negative karma for us. So I can use the excuse, that person made me angry, but the minute I harm my karma, so them getting angry is their karma. They say something nasty to me, that's their karma. I don't wish them suffering, but they've harmed, and that's what's going to come back. So karma is not about punishment. It's not about a judge deciding whether this action was good or bad. It's a law. It's a law of nature, like gravity is a law of nature. So if you go on the roof of this temple and you jump off and say, I don't believe in gravity, you're still going to fall to the ground. If you say you don't believe in karma, the reason Buddha says to listen to these teachings with an open mind, at least. So maybe I don't believe in karma, I can't understand it. I'll keep reading. I'll keep trying to understand how this works. Is because if we deny the law of karma, we're going to continue to create our own suffering, and we're creating the suffering of others. So if I speak out of anger and I go and okay, so you've made me angry and I'm feeling horrible. So what do I want to do? I feel horrible. I want to make you feel horrible. So I'm going to say everything I can to make you feel bad about what you did. So now I've harmed. I've made you feel bad. My intention, whether we want to face it or not, was to make you feel bad. If I'm speaking out of anger, that is my intention. My intention actually is to make you feel as bad as you're making me feel. So we really have to watch how this all works. So something happens. I get angry. I exaggerate reality. I relate to that thing as if it's the exaggeration instead of the reality. And I now act out of that. So we have to get really, really good at this. Too angry to speak means don't speak. That's where we start. So most of us have gotten past the physical harm. So I'm not likely to punch somebody, slap them. Some people still are at that level where they punch or they slap or they hit or they punch a wall and they hurt their hand. And if so, if that's where you're at, that's where you start. We can only start where we're at. We have to know where we're at. Where is it that I hurt others when I'm angry? What makes me follow that anger? And what can I do not to? So one of my teachers had this brilliant method. And he said, no matter what the situation, you can always excuse yourself and go to the restroom. So the minute you're talking to your boss and you're in the middle of a meeting and you are about to say something that you know is not going to go over well, take a deep breath, you stop yourself, you say, please excuse me, I have to go to the restroom, I'll be right back. And you go in the restroom and you go through. I used to do this in the beginning.
I would do exactly what Kadamnik said. I would go in the restroom and I would go, okay, why is it I don't want to retaliate right now? Because I am really angry and I want to show this person. I used to be the person who not only replied to emails when I was angry, I would copy your boss on it. So look what our anger does. Not only am I going to retaliate, I'm going to make it even bigger. So I would go in the bathroom and I'd go, okay, what was it he said? Okay, I always regret. I always regret what I say to a friend when I'm angry. I always do. I always end up making a big deal out of something that is not a big deal. 2 days later, I never would have said anything about it. It's just not a big deal. You have to learn to let a lot of the little stuff go. What else? What else happens? I'm going to hurt their feelings. I'm going to say something mean. I know me. I'm going to say something mean. And you go through the list of why you don't want to speak out of anger until you can take a breath and then go back to the meeting and talk to your boss, or don't talk to your boss, whatever level you're at. So what do we do when someone gets angry at us? How do we not get angry? So wisdom. When we get good at this, we get so mentally stable that we are able to have people come at us without then very unskillfully going right back at them. So our ordinary way of doing this. So I did this one time very early in my practice. I was working with a child and her mother came in and I was so upset that I needed to tell this mother how it was. So I tried to talk to her. Well, it turned out she had come in because she needed to tell me something. So I got a little louder because what I had to say was really important. And then she got a little louder because what she had to say was really important. And luckily I had just started at the temple and I thought, wait a minute. This isn't the way Buddha tells me to do it. And I looked at her and I said, I'm so sorry. I said, can we sit down and talk about this? And I listened. I realized what I wanted was for her to listen to me, and what she wanted was for me to listen. So I let her go first. So I sat down and I really, really listened to her. I wasn't thinking of what I was going to say next, which is another thing we do when we're angry. We pretend to be listening, but we're not. And I really listened to her. And then when she had her say, I was able to have my say because now she could hear me because I was no longer coming at her with judgment and anger. It changed it completely. We sat down and had a conversation instead. So when somebody comes at us with anger, if our intention, so we go in the morning and we always set an intention. So if my intention today, it's never going to be, I hope to have a fight with somebody. I hope to scream at somebody. It's never going to be that. So if I say, I hope today to work on my patience, be careful, because if you believe in your spiritual guide, he'll find some reasons to bring you to be patient for. I want to benefit others. Please, Geshe-la, show me ways I can benefit others. So one of the ways you can benefit somebody is if somebody's coming at me, they're committing negative karma. They're harming me. I can't do anything about that, but what I can do is I can help them to calm down. So I always find it very interesting that somebody on a personal level, I get angry. Whereas when I work with my clients, they can literally be screaming at me and I have zero anger. There's no anger that arises. Why? What's the difference? It's because of how I'm relating to that person. I'm here to help them. I'm here to help that person. So I'm going to help them to calm down. Instead of coming back at them with anger, I'm going to get very even and I'm going to talk very slowly so they hear me. I'm going to talk very quietly so they hear me. So our anger lies to us. Our anger says talk really loud, talk really forcefully, come at them. People don't hear us when we do that. They don't hear us at all. They get defensive, they get scared, they shut down. I have a friend who has told me if anybody comes at him and he knows they're angry in that moment, he shuts down completely. He can't even hear you. So he can't learn from what you're trying to teach him or what you're trying to tell him. You have to come at him from a very loving place, and then he actually can improve. So I've noticed that even with the things like the demonstrations, you know, there might be people who have an inkling that what they did was wrong, maybe even more than an inkling that what they did was wrong. But it's very hard for them to admit to that and to grow from that if you're coming at them. Because if you come at them, what do? They defend their point of view. They make it even stronger. So our delusion is lying to us. It's telling us that to get our needs met, we need to act in a very unkind, unskillful, out of control way. Okay, so just one last thing. This is something that helps us not to get as angry with people who are angry. And it's that Geshe-la mentions, so you know how out of control you are when you're in a rage or angry? You can see how out of control that person is. They're out of control. He said to think of it as not that they're an angry person, because that's connecting the person with their delusion. They're not their delusions any more than you are your anger or your delusions. They're afflicted by. So there might be somebody who is very afflicted by anger. There might be a wisdom in my not being around that person, especially while they're afflicted with anger. But we never lose our love and compassion for them. So if I have a best friend who's angry with me, even if they're angry with me frequently, I can still have compassion for that. And I promise you, if you speak out of that love and compassion, they will hear you better. So just like somebody having cancer, they're afflicted by cancer, and you would never blame them for being afflicted with cancer. You'd only have compassion for them. It's the same if somebody has anger. Again, it doesn't mean that you don't maybe need to have a talk with them about their anger. But is this the time? Am I the person? And how am I going to say it so that it will most beneficially be received? How is that person best going to hear me? Okay, so we're going to take all that information and use it in our meditation. So our meditation has two parts. The first part is called contemplation or analytical meditation. And what we do is you're going to take those points to contemplate how speaking out of anger has, in your experience, this is scientific method, it's in our experience, we've all experienced this. We've all experienced speaking out of anger and regretting it. So you have to go into your mind and your heart and find your experience so that naturally a determination will arise where you go, oh, I need to not do that. Little light bulb goes off. I need to not do that. I need to not speak out of anger. I need to find ways to speak to this person so that I can get my point across, but so that they can hear me. When that determination arises in your mind naturally, you want to hold that single-pointedly. So analytical meditation, your mind is moving around. It's contemplating. The minute that determination arises, you want to stop moving and hold it. Hold it single-pointedly as long as you can, strongly, determined. After a while, you're going to notice that that determination either got softer or you've wandered and you're not thinking about your determination at all. Whichever happens, you're going to have to contemplate at least a little bit again, not as much as the first time, to get back to that determination. You already got there once, so you know the steps to get there. So it will much more quickly come up, oh yeah, that's what it was. My determination was, I'm not going to do that. And then you hold that single-pointedly again. So in the beginning, we lose our object pretty often and have to recontemplate to get back to it and then hold it. Eventually, when you get practiced at that, you'll be able to hold that determination for the whole session. First for a minute, first for 30 seconds, then for a minute, then for 5 minutes, then for your whole session. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do before we go into our meditation is we're going to do the liberating prayer. So very important that you focus on the prayer. If you let your mind wander during the prayers, it's more likely to wander during your meditation as well. So keep your focus. The prayer is talking about the good qualities of Buddha Shakyamuni, holy beings, enlightened beings, with the understanding that these qualities are our potential. Our potential is to have a mind that is refuge for others, to have speech that benefits others. So as you're doing the prayer, we're asking, we're requesting, Buddha, please help me to be like you so that I can help others, so that I can stay peaceful. Okay, so we'll do the liberating prayer.
O Blessed One, Shakyamuni Buddha, precious treasury of compassion, bestower of supreme inner peace, you who love all beings without exception, are the source of happiness and goodness, and you guide us to the liberating path. Your body is a wish-fulfilling jewel. Your speech is supreme purifying nectar, and your mind is refuge for all living beings. With folded hands I turn to you, supreme unchanging friend. I request from the depths of my heart, please give me the light of your wisdom to dispel the darkness of my mind, and to heal my mental continuum. Please nourish me with your goodness, that I in turn may nourish all beings with an unceasing banquet of delight. Through your compassionate intention, your blessings and virtuous deeds, and my strong wish to rely upon you, may all suffering quickly cease, and all happiness and joy be fulfilled, and may holy
Okay, so get back in your best meditation position, remembering to keep your back straight, not tense. Your mind relaxed, but determined to be focused. Joyful. It's meant to be joyful. And just contemplate for yourself, how has speaking out of anger felt or looked? How has it affected you when you've done that? And when a determination arises to work on that, maybe with a specific person, make it as real to your experience and needs as possible. Then you hold that single pointedly without distraction. Make it very practical. How am I going to put this teaching into practice this day, this week? Remembering that my spiritual guide gave this teaching just for me. take the last couple of minutes to really hone your determination. So how are you going to remember this determination, this day, this week? And then without losing your determination, gently arise from your meditation. So that's the formal meditation. And then we have what's called life, the meditation break. So we want them to support each other. So in meditation, we're very determined. But in the meditation break, we're very gentle in our practice. So Geshe-la says, don't worry, just try. Which means don't worry, but try. So we have to be putting forth effort, but we don't beat ourselves up. So you start the morning, I'm not going to speak out of anger. And then you check at the end of the day, how did I do? If you did well, really, really rejoice in having done well. Even if you did okay, and that's better than you would have done, really rejoice in that. If you find you really did poorly, you're not happy with how you responded to somebody, go back into meditation and practice that exact same scenario, doing it how you wished you had done it. I did this for years, and it's a good practice to practice doing it right, and it gets more and more, it increases your skill so that you're able to do it. And then the next day you set your intention again. And we could set this intention not to speak out of anger every day for years. That could be if that's your biggest illusion, it could be a wonderful practice for years. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. We have deeply entrenched bad mental habits. So if you've ever tried to change a habit, it takes effort. And then dedicate. So at the end of our practice, we always want to dedicate everything we just did, all the good karma we just created toward having this realization. So through these teachings and meditations and prayers, may we all learn to have a controlled, peaceful, loving, cherishing, compassionate, joyful mind. And may everyone else have the same. May they all find these teachings so that they can learn how to have a peaceful mind. Okay, so thank you. And again, Marlene will be teaching next week, and then Gentogden will be back to finish the series after that. So we are saying prayers for you and your family always. If you have any questions, my email is EPC, Education Program Coordinator, EPC, at meditationmd.org. Thank you.